Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Text 17 to 18. Bhautikānām ca bhāvānām shaktirishām ca tatkritam ashriddhādhanam shatvan durmedhan risha rasita yusha durbhagam janan vikshya munir divyena chakshusha sarvavarnashramanam yad dadayu yitam mamodrika.
Translation. The great sage, who was fully equipped in knowledge, could see through his transcendental vision the deterioration of everything material due to the influence of the age. He could also see that the faithless people in general would be reduced in duration of life and would be impatient due to lack of goodness. Thus he contemplated for the welfare of men in all statuses and orders of life.
Text 19. Chaturhotram karma shuddham prajanam vikshya vedikam vyadadad yagyas santatayai vedam ekam chaturvidam.
Text 19. He saw that the sacrifices mentioned in the Vedas were means by which the people's occupations could be purified. And to simplify the process, he divided the one Veda into 4 in order to expand them among men.
Text 20. Rikyajah samatharvakya Vedas chatvara udrita Itihasa puranamam cha panchamo vedya uchyate.
The 4 divisions of the original sources of knowledge, the Vedas, were made separately, but the historical facts and authentic stories mentioned in the Puranas are called the 5th Veda.
Text 21. Tatrarga Veda dharaha pelaha Samago jaimin ke kavi Vaishyam payana ivaiko Nishnato yajushamata.
After the Vedas were divided into 4 divisions, Paila Rishi became the professor of the Rig Veda, Jaimini the professor of the Sama Veda, and Vaishampayana alone became glorified by the Yajur Veda.
Text 22. Atharvangirasham asit sumantur dharuno muni itihasa purana namam pitamiro maharshana.
The Sumanta Muni Angira, who was very devotedly engaged, was entrusted with the Atharva Veda, and my father, Romaharshana, was entrusted with the Puranas and historical records.
Text 23. Ta eta rishayo vedam swayam vyashanan anikadha shishyai prashishyasya cha tach chishyer vedaste sakhino bhavan.
All these learned scholars in their turn rendered their entrusted Vedas onto their many disciples, grand disciples and great-grand disciples, and thus the respective branches of the followers of the Vedas became into being.
Text 24. Ta eva veda durmedhyair dharayante purushair yatha evam chakara bhagvana vyasaha kripan vatsala.
Thus the great sage Vyasadeva, who is very kind to the ignorant masses, edited the Vedas so they might be assimilated by less intellectual men.
Text 25. Stri Shudra Dvija Bandhunam Trayena Shruti Gochara Karma Shreyasi Muddhanam Shreya Evam Bhavediha Iti Bharatam Akhyanam Kripaya Munina Kritam.
Out of compassion, the great sage thought it wise that this would enable men to achieve the ultimate goal of life. Thus he compiled the great historical narration called the Mahabharata for women, laborers, and friends of the twice-born.
Text 26. Evam pravrittasya sada bhutanamam shrayasi dvija sarvatmake napi yada natushad hridayam tata.
O twice-born Brahmanas, still his mind was not satisfied, although he engaged himself in working for the total welfare of all people.
Text 27. Nati prashida tridhaya sarasvatyastate shucha vitarkayan viviktastha idam chovacha dharmita.
Thus the sage, being dissatisfied at heart, at once began to reflect, because he knew the essence of religion, and he said within himself.
Text 28 to 29. Dhrita vratena hi maya chandasi guruvo gneha manita nirvayalikena grihitam chanuशासनम भारत व्यपदेशना ये आम्नायर्थाश्च प्रदर्शिता दृश्यते यात्र धर्मादि स्त्री शूद्रैर्दिभिरप्युते.
I have under strict disciplinary vows unpretentiously worshipped the Vedas, the spiritual masters, and the altar of sacrifice. I have also abided by the rulings and have shown the import of disciplic succession through the explanation of the Mahabharata, by which even women, Sudras, and others, friends of the twice-born, can see the path of religion.
Text 30. Tathapi batame dhayao hiyatma chaivatmana vibhu asampanna eva bhati brahma varchasya sattamaha.
I'm feeling incomplete, though I myself am fully equipped with everything required by the Vedas.
Text 31. Kim va bhagavata dharma na prayena nirupita priya paramhansanam ta eva hi achyuta priya.
This may be because I did not specifically point out the devotional service of the Lord, which is dear both to perfect beings and to the infallible Lord.
Text 32. Tasyevam khilam atmanam maniyam manasya khityata krishnasya narado bhyagad ashramam prag udharatam.
As mentioned before, Narada reached the cottage of Krishna Dvaipayana Vyasa on the banks of the Saraswati, just as Vyasadeva was regretting his defects.
Text 33. Tam abhigyaya sahasa pratyuthaya gatam muni pujayam asavidhivan naradam shurapujitam.
At this Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Divya Mataji and Asha Mataji. Wonderful recitation.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Thank you.
Very nice. So remind me, what verses are we doing today? It's 20, 27,
28 and 29, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. It is 28 and 29. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Sorry, it's so busy day I had today. You probably, I don't know if you can hear Kirtan in the background. We have all the devotees from the ladies ashram at our place today to take prashadam. And it was a day very busy trying to prepare for the devotees. So unfortunately, I never had time to really study, but we shall read and discuss. So before we start, let us recite the Mangala Charanam praise together, and then we will discuss verse 28 and 29. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yata Padakamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutan Parijana Saitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gourangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Rishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vanchakalpa Tarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhye Vacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivashari Gaura Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnupadaya, Krishna Prashtaya Bhutale, Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Niti Namine. Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Prasyacha Deshatarine Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. I just want to find out, is the kirtan from the background coming through from your side? Or you can...
No, we can't hear anything.
Oh, okay, that's fine then. So text number 28 to 29. Drita Vratena Himhaya Chandamsi Guravo Dhyanaya Manita Nirvyalikaina Gritam Chanusa Sanam Bharata Vyapa Deshena I Amna Yartascha Pradarsitaha Drishyate Yatra Dharmadi Shri Sudras Dibhir Api Uta. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Oh, I need to show the... I have, under strict disciplinary vows, unpretentiously worshipped the Vedas, the spiritual masters, and the altar of sacrifice. I have also abided by the rulings and have shown the import of disciplic succession through the explanation of the Mahabharata, by which even women, Shudras, and others, friends of the twice-born, can see the path of religion. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. No one can understand the import of the Vedas without having undergone a strict disciplinary vow and disciplic succession. The Vedas, spiritual masters, and sacrificial fire must be worshipped by the desiring candidate. All these intricacies of Vedic knowledge are systematically presented in the Mahabharata for the understanding of the woman class, the laborer class, and the unqualified members of Brahmana, Kshatriya, or Vaishya families. In this age, the Mahabharata is more essential than the original Vedas. So in this verse, we see the internal thoughts of Srila Vyasadeva. And this thoughts process is going to very soon reach a crescendo. In one sense, Srila Vyasadeva in these verses is trying to justify. He's trying to justify his mission, or what is achieved in his mission so far. But as we'll see very soon, Vyasadeva will come to the point, Srila Vyasadeva, to admit that all that he has done has not reached the purpose. And what is that purpose? The purpose of all Vedic knowledge, Vedanta Krit, Vedavid, Aham Veda Vedya. Aham Veda. So it is mentioned in the Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says that by all the Vedas he is to be known. So if one studies the Vedic literature and one does not come to the point of knowing Krishna, then it's all simply a wasted effort. Shrama I eva kevalam. Simply a wasted effort. Now in the purport, Srila Prabhupada says, no one can understand the import of the Vedas without having undergone a strict disciplinary vow and disciplic succession. The Vedas, spiritual masters and sacrificial fire must be worshipped by the desiring candidate. So we see here immediately the process of Vedic knowledge is not at all inclusive. It largely, the Vedas was only studied and understood by a small fraction of people. Firstly, the Vedas are written in what is called Vedic Sanskrit. You have different types of Sanskrit. You have Vedic Sanskrit, you have Puranic Sanskrit, and you have other versions of Sanskrit. The Vedic Sanskrit is extremely difficult. To understand Vedic Sanskrit, one has to study grammar for at least 9 to 10 years. And here in the verse is explaining that one has to go strict disciplinary vows. From a very young age, one should enter Gurukul. One should follow the vow of celibacy. And one has to accept a guru. And one has to serve the guru. And then one has some possibility of understanding the Vedas. But Srila Vyasadeva considered at some point in time, he has to make Vedic knowledge more inclusive, to include all of the population. And therefore he compiled the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata explains the essential spiritual truths in a way that is more like story or historical narration, which can be easily understood. The Mahabharata itself is written in simple Sanskrit. And in this way, Vyasadeva, he thought he had made the Mahabharata accessible, or the Vedas accessible to all people. In the last statement here, Srila Prabhupada says something quite interesting. He says, in this age, the Mahabharata is more essential than the original Vedas. So someone may ask the question there, if this is so, it is more essential than the original Vedas. Why did Srila Prabhupada not translate the Mahabharata? Srila Prabhupada dedicated his life towards translating the Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chaitanya Charitamrita, and Nectar of Devotion. And Srila Prabhupada said, in these books, one can understand the complete Vedas. So anyone would like to vouch for why Srila Prabhupada didn't make a specific effort to translate the Mahabharata? Anyone got any thoughts on this?
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare
My
Krishna.
humble obeisance to you.
My humble
Can I
obeisance.
try?
Yeah, sure, certainly.
Yes, please. I think the Bhagavad Gita is the most important part in the Mahabharata, and the little story of Mahabharata of how what happened, and that kind of thing people know. Generally, people know, okay, there was a war, and then but Bhagavad Gita is the most important things, and Prabhupada translated Bhagavad Gita. I think so. I don't know if it's the right answer. Hare Krishna.
That's a very good answer. The Bhagavad Gita is part of the Mahabharata. Yeah. Yes, Urmila Ben, Mataji, you want to say something?
Yeah. Mahabharata and Ramayana is like a history, while Bhagavatam is the glories of Krishna.
Yes. Yes. So, but in particular, why didn't Srila Prabhupada make an endeavor to translate the Mahabharata?
Because it's in a history form. It's written like a history.
Okay.
And Bhagavatam is all glories of Krishna and all the other avatars also.
Yes. Yes, that's a good point you're making. Anyone else has any thoughts on this? Arsha Mataji?
Is it because the Mahabharata is incorporated in the Bhagavad Gita, part of it?
Bhagavad Gita is incorporated in the Mahabharata. Yes.
Hare Krishna.
Yes.
Bhagavad Gita was spoken by Lord Krishna himself.
Mm-hmm.
And Srimad Bhagavatam is talking about Krishna, all stories about Krishna.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Thank you, Krishnangi Mataji. That's a good point you make. So there's a few. Yes. Mataji, you want to say something?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the answer or what. Prabhupada must have thought that it was already 70, 65, 70 like that. So he thought Mahabharata has got 100, more than 100,000 slokas.
Mm-hmm.
So whatever time is left, let me use the best way.
Okay. Prabhupada thought about it because of its length. Who else we've got? We've got Govinda Gopi Mataji. Oh, Mataji, I know you got an iPad. Do you want to say something?
Yes, Hare Krishna, Prabhu, Danda Pranam, everyone. Bhagavad Gita is actually like when you go to primary school. It's Krishna himself telling us who he is so that we can understand who he is. And Srimad Bhagavatam is like you go into the secondary school, a step higher, where you can know Krishna personally from his activities, pastime, and it's very, very in-depth. And Srimad Bhagavatam is the cream where you actually learn how to love Krishna even more and accept him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. I'm not sure if I'm right, Prabhu. Thank you.
Yeah, you are certainly right. Those are very good points you made, Govinda Gopi Mataji. Sailesh Prabhu, you raised your hand.
Thank you, Shambhuji. Mahabharata is Itihas. It is narration as opposed to philosophy, and doesn't contain devotional element apart from the Bhagavad Gita, which is separately, sort of extracted by Srila Prabhupada. And basically, it is more karma kanda itihas as opposed to pure bhakti philosophy. So, which is why Prabhupada didn't focus on that, I believe.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, there are a few reasons. Sorry, Mataji, did you want to say something? Mataji?
Well, I just want to say, Prabhuji, that in Mahabharata, nothing was glorifying Krishna and devotional service. So that's the reason I think Prabhupada didn't mention that much about, Mahabharata, because it was all Bhagavad Gita, it was all devotional service and glorifying Krishna. This is what most important, And Mahabharata was, anybody could understand Mahabharata. It was like a story, it has, just maybe that's the reason,
Yeah, that's a good reason, Mataji, about devotional service. And many of you have said the same thing.
Yeah, did not glorify Krishna in the Mahabharata.
Yeah.
Yeah, because Krishna was there, and Kaurav people, they didn't understand that he's Krishna.
True.
So Pandavas knew that this Krishna is God, personality of Godhead. And the others, demons, they didn't understand that this personality of Godhead. So it was not glorified in Mahabharata and devotional service. That's all I can think.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, shall I say one more point?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, when Vyasadeva wrote all the Purans and all, then also he wasn't satisfied. So then he wrote Bhagavatam after advice from Narad Muni. So Prabhupada must have also thought that Bhagavatam is the best that I should give to the people in the Kali Yuga.
Yes. Yes. Yes, thank you very much for all of your points. I just want to touch on a few reasons explained by some of our senior devotees on this particular point. The first point is that the Mahabharata has not been as authentically preserved as Srimad Bhagavatam. At any one point in time, if you want to see or find out where or what is authentic Mahabharata, we will struggle to find. There are so many different versions of Mahabharata that's currently available. And many of them, like if you go to south of India, there's a Mahabharata that exists in South India. And that version of Mahabharata differs from where you see the Mahabharata from North India. And if one tries to trace the Mahabharata, the original Mahabharata, then one will see that that's not very difficult. And Prabhupada mentioned that a few times, that the Mahabharata, the original Mahabharata, is not difficult to find. With the passage of time, there seems to have been, changes made and variations made. So that is one reason that Srila Prabhupada didn't translate. And secondly, as many of you all have pointed out, if one studies the Mahabharata, yes, Krishna is there, and Krishna is, in so many ways, he's portrayed as God. But most of the time, the Mahabharata is about Krishna in Dwaraka, or Krishna in his mood as a prince. We do not see in the Mahabharata Vrindavan Krishna. Vrindavan Krishna is the original Swayam Bhagavan. Krishna in his original form, he displays his pastimes in Vrindavan. So that's another reason. And obviously, devotional service to Krishna, he's not at all comes through in the Mahabharata. So we see that the Mahabharata is an important literature, but for many reasons, it is not accepted. We see in the pastimes of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu came as a devotee to teach devotional service. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he proclaimed that the highest scripture is Srimad Bhagavatam. We don't see in the pastimes of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, preaching or reading the Mahabharata or speaking much from the Mahabharata. Constantly, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preaches and glorifies Srimad Bhagavatam as the topmost scripture. And the fourth reason we can see, if Mahabharata was indeed that literature which could completely satisfy the self, Yayatma Suprasidati, then Srila Vyasadeva wouldn't be experiencing what he's experiencing in these verses. And that is a sense of dissatisfaction that he has not given the complete knowledge. He is not given the complete knowledge. So one may ask the question then, what is the qualification of Srimad Bhagavatam? It is said here that Mahabharata makes the Vedas accessible to many people. Does Srimad Bhagavatam make the Vedic literature more accessible, the Vedas more accessible than the Mahabharata? And the answer is yes, certainly. And what is the proof for that? What is the proof that Srimad Bhagavatam is accessible to all classes of people? The proof is in what Srila Prabhupada has done. Srila Prabhupada made Srimad Bhagavatam accessible to all kinds of people in Siberia, in Africa, in China, in all types of situations. Anybody from any class, from any background, who is able to pick up Srimad Bhagavatam, they will easily and very quickly get the highest realization of Krishna consciousness. So Srimad Bhagavatam is indeed, and we can see it. I mean, I don't want to preempt it, the following verses, but we can see that is only Srimad Bhagavatam that can satisfy the self. Yayatma Suprasidati. And but in the Mahabharata, we have to accept that within the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita. So in one sense, one can say that the Mahabharata is more essential than the original Vedas because the Bhagavad Gita contains the essential teachings of the Vedas. So in one sense, we almost, in one sense, apparently lessening the importance of Mahabharata. But we know that the Mahabharata contains the Bhagavad Gita. So we cannot, in one sense, also discount it as a lesser scripture because the Bhagavad Gita is an essential scripture. So maybe I'll stop here and take any questions or comments that anyone may have. Anyone's got any questions or comments?
I have a quick question, Prabhu.
Yes, please.
So when we know that the Mahabharata's origin can't be traced so easily and various versions exist, do we know whether the Gita element of that has also accordingly had various versions being adapted, or Gita has been preserved regardless, because Gita is a subset of the Mahabharata?
Yes, that's a very good question, Sailesh Prabhu. If we say that the Mahabharata has been changed, is the Bhagavad Gita also caught within that? And for two reasons, we would say no. The first reason, Krishna says himself in the Bhagavad Gita, whenever the message of the Bhagavad Gita becomes tainted or changed, he will personally appear and speak it again. Okay. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted the Bhagavad Gita. We know the story of the Brahmin in South India who was illiterate, but he was reading while he was looking at the Bhagavad Gita and he was tearing. And Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu asked him why he's crying, where others were laughing at him because he's illiterate. And he was saying that he was watching the picture of Krishna. And he felt very emotional about that, watching how Krishna was the charioteer. So Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu accepted the Bhagavad Gita. I was listening to a lecture by His Grace Radhika Raman Prabhu recently, who is one of the foremost scholars within ISKCON. And Radhika Raman Prabhu was saying that the Bhagavad Gita part of the Mahabharata, that there has been some changes, but essentially, even like we know when Srila Prabhupada went to America, he took with him the Dr. Radhakrishnan's version of the Bhagavad Gita. And we all know that Srila Prabhupada was seriously opposed to Dr. Radhakrishnan's translation of the Bhagavad Gita and his interpretation. But the Sanskrit, Prabhupada said, was essentially fully intact. It was only the interpretations that were changing. So to answer your question, the Bhagavad Gita part of the Mahabharata is largely very well preserved, and we don't see big deviations in the Bhagavad Gita aspect of the Mahabharata. Does that answer your question, Prabhu?
Yes, Prabhu. Thank you very much.
Hare Krishna. Any other questions or comments? Srila Prabhupada uses some very interesting words here. He says, Vyasadeva says, unpretentiously worshipped the Vedas. So Srila Vyasadeva is saying that, he tried to present the Vedas in as authentic way as possible. But still, despite him trying to do that, he was not satisfied. Okay, any other questions or comments by anyone, dear devotee? So Sundari Mataji is saying, Bhagavad Gita is the essence of Mahabharata. Quite true. Sundari Mataji, thank you for your comment. Okay, if there's no further questions or comments, Urmila Mataji, you wanted to say something?
No, it's very basic. Just I want to confirm that this Mahabharata and other books were destroyed by the foreigners, those who came to India more than 1200 years ago. While Gita and Bhagavad, they were wrapped in a piece of cloth, so they didn't destroy. So it's original. Does it mean that way?
I don't know the exact history. Certainly the foreigners, India was invaded by many of the foreigners, the Mughals, and the Muslims, the Turks, and eventually the British. And the British had a very specific strategy that if they could discredit the scriptures that the Indians were so faithful to, they could break the culture of the Hindus. So they did make that attempt, and some of the digressions was a direct result of that. But Srimad Bhagavatam, yeah, it was preserved, probably much better than the Mahabharata was. It maybe the Britishers and the foreigners didn't really appreciate the value of Srimad Bhagavatam. Yeah, Hare Krishna. Okay, dear devotees, if there's no other questions or comments, we shall close today's session. Thank you very much for your kind attendance and participation. Tomorrow's verse is very interesting. Actually, I thought today's verse was text number 30, and I'd prepared some very nice verses for text number 30, and I didn't realize. But tomorrow's verse is really, really nice. And I look
So you
forward.
better take the class tomorrow then, Prabhuji.
No, it's okay. All of the devotees here are really good. Hare Krishna, Vancha Kalpaturabhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyascha, Patitanam Papapunya Vaishnava, Ananta Kuri Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai, Shri Prabhupada Ki Jai, Gaura Bhakta Nityanande, Hare Bol. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare
Thank
Krishna,
you.
Prabhuji.
Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Nice